Hello everybody, thanks for coming along. My name is Philip Grover, I'm an assistant curator here at the museum. I work with photograph, film and sound. Actually, more usually I work with photographs, but actually this project has been a really exciting chance to engage with the sound collections here. And for those of you who arrived at the beginning, you'll have heard Stuart Faggs, who is the founder of Cities and Memory, talk about the development of the project. And he effectively pitched to the museum about a year ago that we could do a project working with the museum's ethnographic sound recordings. We'd choose a selection and then make them available to the artists to produce new works. So we ended up choosing 100 of the sound recordings. Those were chosen by my colleague Chris. He selected digital files. We had digitised the ethnographic field recordings about 12 years or so ago, and they've been available online for a little while. So he made a selection of 100 sounds. Some were quite well researched as part of that previous project. Some had very little information about them, so I was able to do a little bit of research. They often connected with some of the other collections in the museum. That's manuscript collections, photographs, the object collection. So often there was metadata that could be brought together around those recordings, and they were then offered up to the artists, who each chose one recording that inspired them to produce new work. And so we're very pleased tonight to have Ilaria Boffa, Salma Ahmed and Neil Spencer Bruce, who are here going to talk about their three sounds and what they were inspired and how they were inspired to produce the new work. And we're going to go through them one by one. So I'm going to start off asking Ilaria, who made a new audio track called An Ode to a River, a Parrot, a Woman. And the original recording was made in 1965 in Colombia by two Oxford University students. And the track originally was called Choco Woman Calling a Parrot. And Evie here is going to play a little clip of that original track before I ask Ilaria about it.
We hear you, loud, raucous shriek. Screet, screet, screet. Frequency akin, divine communing.
So, Ilaria, could you tell us a little bit about the track, why you chose it, your background as an artist, and the creative approach that you took?
First of all, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be here and also for this project, amazing collective project. Well, I think that sound and that woman calling to a parrot called me somehow because really I connected to the sound of her voice and also the idea of creating a kind of bridge between, maybe my voice, her voice, the voice of the parrot and the birds in my local place where I live, and also the river, because I work with the sound of rivers and especially on the riverbank where I live. And so with my hydrophone, I record the voice of the river. And so this recording was also taken on a river, the Puricha River in Colombia, in the Chocó department. And so all these kind of elements, really were kind of talking to me. And so I decided to go with this.
Okay, great. Salma, you've created a piece called Cano Bird, Cano Beads, Cano Seeds, based on rock gong music from Nigeria, recorded by an anthropologist, Bernard Fagg, in 1955. Can you tell us why you chose that recording and how you approached it?
Are people going to hear?
Yes, Evie's about to play.
Yeah.
This is Salma's piece.
In northern Nigeria, music
from Benin Kudu, northern Nigeria.
To wannan shi ake amfani da shi wajen sanarwa, wajen mika sako, means of communication.
So, thank you very much, Philip, and thanks for everyone for coming. I grew up in Nigeria, actually, and when I heard about this project happening, I applied in the hope that I would get this one particular track. And I thought, well, if I don't get this track, then I'm a bit screwed, because I just want this track. So luckily I got this track, and it was recorded, as you say, in 1956. An archaeologist who was part of the colonial British administration in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, in Kano, where I grew up as a child, recording these rock gongs in these caves. And what's interesting for me, it's quite a long piece actually, and I selected, various sections of it, including what you can hear there, which is sort of lots of buzzing sounds and the actual kind of ropey sounds of the recordings, and the actual colonial voice speaking, which is Bernard Bagg speaking and explaining things. And that was a very particular, important aspect for me of this recording. And he's getting local drummers to come and try to mimic their usual traditional rhythms that they would play on different types of drums, 5 different types of drums, but instead of using their own rhythms, they're using it on these rock gongs, which are kind of 2,000-year-old Neolithic caves with cave paintings and these rocks that have indentations that show that they were used for that. So for me, there was a mediation in this piece where you're not actually hearing the original instruments, really. You're hearing Bernard Bagg trying to get people to mimic on the gongs. And for me, I wanted to introduce various layers, because colonial archives are very slippery, and they give you the impression that things are somehow just as is, and the various sort of silences and gaps and historical context and political context, is not very apparent. So for me, I wanted to introduce various sort of stratifications in the sound. So I took all the buzzing and the kind of ropey bits and actually put them on repeat throughout the piece to remind us that there's this colonial interference going on throughout the piece. I also found a really old recording of my own voice 47 years ago as a child, on an old tape, which was a bit of a palaver to try and get off, myself mimicking a bird in the garden. So if you get to listen to the track, you can hear that. So that was another layer of mimicking, whilst also introducing my own presence into the scene. I'm half Egyptian, half English, and I was brought up as a Muslim, and the northern Nigeria is an Islamic part of Nigeria. People don't really know that much about it, and I wanted to bring in the House of Voices to come and talk about the caves. And that clip there, you could hear actually a teacher. So I contacted some friends I still have in Kano, Nigeria, a guy called Omar Shamsi Muhammad, who was a cousin of my school friend from 40 years ago, rushed off in his car, went to the caves and recorded various things. He interviewed a historian, and he interviewed a teacher, and you can hear there in that clip the teacher is showing the students the difference between knocking a rock that isn't a gong in the cave and one that's a gong. So the rocks that are gongs are kind of positioned so they're not touching anything else very much. They're held sort of floating in the air. And so I wanted to bring in the House of Voices of the present to be talking, even if you can't understand. There's quite a long interview in the section as well. And I thought it doesn't matter that you don't understand, because they've got to listen to Bernard Bagg kind of talking about things in English. So now we can hear how some people think, well, what the hell are they talking about? So there are various, myself from the past, Bernard Bagg, and also I introduced a lot of colonial violence. So Nigeria was created in an extremely violent way, and I drew on a Nigerian historian's book called What Britain Did to Nigeria by Max Siolan, And we haven't used those clips here, but there are some clips later on in the piece about some of the killing and things that went on as well, at the kind of lower stratification of the piece.
Okay, thank you, Salma. And Neil, you selected a track from Cameroon made among the bomb people by a journalist called Lois Mitchison in 1958. What drew you to that track, and how?
I'm going to have to make a confession here. I didn't actually choose that track because I ended up actually doing 2 tracks for this because there was some left over at the end, and Stuart put out a panic message. This one happens to be the one that I was given.
Okay.
But in hindsight, the reason I chose it for now is I felt that it resonated with me more than the one that I actually chose because somehow I missed it when I was going through the list, choosing the first time. So I took a slightly different approach. I'm interested in field recordings and recordings being time, out, place, and fractures in time, and kind of spectral images of the past showing their ephemerality. And I wanted to kind of work with methods which showed a form of decay over time, but then a rebirth. So this is a reimagining and rebirth of this recording. So I kind of borrowed some ideas from Steve Reich and used some tape loops. I think it was actually your conversation in one of the groups about bringing cassette tapes back. It made me get my cassette player out. So I re-recorded a lot of the material that was digital onto cassette and started to degrade it that process. This piece in particular, I also took a method called frippatronics, which is using delays, which kind of create the kind of ethereal looping, but you're not quite sure what you're going to get.
Okay, and I think we haven't heard it yet, actually. So
Yeah.
who's going to play it? Questions. I'm going to start with you, Neil, just to expand on that. What was the most challenging thing for you about working with this recording?
I was going to say this one was the easier one. If I had a challenge with it, I think it was the process that I decided to use. So that meant a lot of, to use the technical term, faff, of trying to get it out onto tape machines and kind of ensure the fidelity of the recording. Whilst that wasn't my original goal, because I wanted it to decay, I still needed it to be, sonically obvious what was happening. And as I was then processing it, I was interested in how, by using this method, which had an arbitrary amount of time where the loop was looping, was to see if the polyrhythms, how they appeared to not go too kind of out there. I didn't want it to be too outlandish and too overlapped. So whilst there is a hoping that the polyrhythmic fill varies and changes as time goes by, but it doesn't become anything that really clashes, because I didn't want it to turn into noise, basically.
I've got a question for Ilaria. Did you undertake any extra research into your particular sound? And if so, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you to the Pitt Rivers Museum. Yes, because these 55 seconds of recording that I took actually were recorded by 2 students from Oxford University, and they were in 1965, and so I discovered that there was also a diary about this travel to Colombia, to the Choco department. And so I contacted Philip and I asked if the diary was available. And so he said, yes, why don't you come here and you read it? And I said, I live in Italy, maybe you can send it to me. So he took pictures of each page, and then I started working on this and reading this beautiful diary, talking about this indigenous population of the Choco department. And as in the previous panel, I felt a little bit uncomfortable in working with this. And in that moment, I realized that I met during a lecture that I took online, a master class actually. There was an artist, a Colombian artist, who did some research in the Choco department, and so I thought, well, I can contact her. So I contacted her, and she was available to discuss, her research. And so then we started this conversation, and while I was writing my poem, because I'm not a musician, I'm a sound recordist, and I am a poet, so I work with eco-poetry, I asked her questions about that population, and also if my words that I was using were correct. And in fact, they were not. So there were some lines that maybe were not appropriate. And so also because I just took some of the words from the diary. But the diary was also called Expedition Diary, and she said, this is very colonialist, so try to, embrace a different kind of wording, also a different kind of language. And so she taught me a lot of things in our conversations, and so I edited also my poem. And then I, of course, with this two line of research, then I was able to put everything together, the sound and the poem. So a lot of many months. In the 3 months, almost all was dedicated to research and then editing and then put together everything.
Fantastic. Salma, have you learned anything about your own practice? Or has your practice developed and grown in some way as a result of working on this project?
Yes, I think so. I mean, as an artist, I work with collage and drawing, writing, film, and I started studying sound last year, and I'm already interested in cross-cultural entanglements and being a kind of mixed race person, and growing up abroad. Having to work with this piece made me learn to listen more intently to these kinds of ghosts, sonic ghosts, and things that we're missing. I know that I felt that I was forced to think more profoundly. I also had to learn to work with somebody who only speaks Hausa in Nigeria and doesn't speak any English, and we basically had to communicate with each other over several months using translation apps and Google, so that kind of helped me learn how to work with somebody in another country, in another language, as well as become more sensitive and more attuned to working with the sensitive material that belongs to somebody else.
Yeah. Great. Neil, did you encounter any creative blockages along the way, and how did you overcome them, if so?
I think with the second one, because it was I for this piece in particular, no, because I think I'd already developed part of the process from the first one. I was talking earlier about kind of creativity. It's part of what I think about I'm a lecturer in sound, so part of creativity with sound is what I do on a daily basis. So I didn't necessarily have any creative barriers. I think it was more of the kind of consideration barriers that became part of this project, rather than knowing what to do with the sound. It's whether I should be doing it.
Yeah. Did you do any research on the sound?
I did some research because I didn't have much time for the second one. I did some more research into the first sound, and I think
how did that change your process then?
I don't think it necessarily changed the process, because I still felt that these were voices echoing, like ghost voices echoing from the past, and it was my responsibility to, in a sense, not necessarily curate them, but to reanimate them for other people's consideration. I was a kind of caretaker of these sounds. Yet the idea that they were ghost voices, that's what changed my process, and think that they are decaying as well. Maybe the preserved archive, whilst it's one of the most amazing resources we can have, also it's slightly not true, because sound decays, and that's the very nature of what sound is a decaying medium. So am I trying to represent that? Do voices
What do you mean by decaying medium?
Well, the very nature you create a transient of sound, it decays. All sound decays. It's a wave that decays over time. So the messages and memories of this decay over time. We're just kind of reimagining what those memories are and those voices. The fact we have digital material now and digital recordings means that we don't lose the quality. Does it have any impact on how we think about those memories? So I was trying to evoke the original materials that they were recorded on are decaying artifacts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ilaria, was there anything from your own personal experience or your own emotional response that you tried to bring into your composition?
Well, definitely. As I said at the beginning, just listening to the sound of the voice of that woman was to me something that it was kind of a response that I wanted to offer, and I also ended up, as you did, mimicking her, calling to the parrot. So just like a crazy person, I was on the riverbank just trying to mimic that kind of sound that is not easy at all. So I also discovered that, just trying to go up at that level of voice to call that parrot was kind of challenging to me. And so I tried on the riverbank, and then I went home to record my voice. And so I was just, asking people, well, please, at home, don't make any noise and don't laugh. And so I was just shouting, and then probably my neighbors, they were thinking, well, there's something going on there. And so yes, I tried to also put inside this piece all that I know somehow about, this spatial temporal connection with the more than human world. So I think that, despite all our feelings of being uncomfortable with this, recordings, but in the end, there's a connection that we can create in terms of sounds, but also, again, with the past, the present, and the future. So we are not here to change what that sound was or to just make a new representation. It's really a way to respond and just to say, again, with the sound or through words, a poem or whatever, just to create a connection. And so, yeah, I try to do this through that piece.
Let's throw it open to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for the three artists?
It's more of a comment, Ilaria. I just love what you just said about how you might have felt, how you embodied that sound when you were trying to emulate that sound, as the woman was trying to relate to this natural being. That's so beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I was really moved because it was just like she was there. When you listen to her voice shouting, that's why I was so taken somehow, because I thought, well, of course she was dead right now, but to me it was just like she was really talking to us. So I just wanted to give, my response. So that's why at the beginning I said, we hear you, and we hear you as a woman, as an indigenous woman, as, a human being. And we are here, I am here for you, just to, take your voice, for everyone to listen to your voice, and and the parrot too, and the river. And so, yeah. This was the intent, at least. So, thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
More questions?
Thanks. Salma, I was really interested in what you said, how you situated your piece within colonialism by including I forgot his name, sorry, but the English guy.
Bernard Fagg, yeah.
I'm interested to know if that angle was kind of part of the brief and the original conception of this project. Like, each of these recordings kind of feels like a reenactment of colonialism, where you're taking an artifact and explaining it in your own way. So I guess my question is for Philip, like, is that intentional on behalf of the Pitt Rivers Museum?
No, not that particular element. They were researched. The sounds were researched, so we had to provide some context for what they were. But then they were really offered up to the artists, and the artists chose a particular track that moved them. But no, there wasn't any of that kind of intent that you're suggesting, not at all. It's really about activating the archive. The archive sits there, it's not visible in the museum, unfortunately. Those collections are digital now, they can be accessed online, but it's really about activating the archive and producing new work from it, making a response, making it available.
As to whether you think that, does it naturally come out of the context that this is happening and that we're in the Pitt Rivers Museum? Does that naturally produce an element of, like, reenacting colonialism, and is that something that, like, the artists were encouraged to engage with?
Well, they considered it, certainly. I mean, the three
Well,
here
I
might
think
like to say, but there was a lot of comment in actually on the website. You can click the information button, and a lot of the artists write about that, how they were concerned maybe about engaging with the track and producing new work in that way. But you might like to say more.
Yes, I think that everyone had a different approach. We had a WhatsApp group, and we had a lot of very intense discussions about what it is we should do, how we should do it, various approaches. We shared articles about decolonising and colonisation, and obviously everyone has a different fragment. As I explained earlier, I chose my fragment especially because you can actually hear the voice of the colonial British presence in the piece, but obviously not everybody had that in their piece. Ilaria had people had the pure sound from the indigenous people without giving you any idea that there was some ethnographer or archaeologist or some colonial presence or colonial power imbalance or structure going on behind. It's not made apparent, and that's part of the problem with the ethnographic and colonial archives. Is those structures are invisible, and so some people wanted to research what was the historical and political context at the time that this sound was being produced. For example, in Nigeria, what were we doing there? What was Britain doing there? We were taking resources and extracting resources and rubber and palm oil and cocoa, and basically getting as much as we could and basically killing people in the process. But not everyone's context was the same, and not everyone wanted to necessarily explore that. They wanted to engage very emotionally or directly, with that voice and with that person. So I think that the context of the museum is a colonial has a colonial history. We can't avoid that. No one joined the project thinking that we could avoid that. But I think that everyone had very genuine and very human registers with which to engage with it, even if they didn't do it as directly as I did, which was to get a colonial, a Nigerian historian to actually say things about the actual, violence and structural kind of imposition that happened. But I don't think that the people that didn't do that had any less of an important message about their process of how to engage with such sensitive material. I think everyone likes Pullman books, knows people who live in Oxford love Philip Pullman, right? And everyone's looking blank, thinking what? And I don't know if any of you in here have read the book, but when the daemons are severed from their humans, and there's this word called intercision. It's an invented, it is an old historical word, but that these objects and sound objects have suffered a process of intercision where their souls, and I think you said something similar in your, the soul of that piece has been cut. Because the object and the sound fragment has been cut from their people, from their souls, from their community, their database, living database that they were part of, and everyone wanted to somehow relink that in their own way, in their own process.
I was just saying, as a slight aside to that, but kind of continuing, from me, my purpose in life, it seems to be, is to get people to engage with sound, because it is always the secondary. If you think about filmmaking, it's something we always put to one side. We don't think about sound. Even on a daily basis, we hear, we don't listen. So a big part of my job is to get people to actively listen to space. And one way is encouraging a newer generation to actually field record. So there is a benefit to field recording. We can analyse, and I think it's really important to analyse how field recording has been done and why it has been done and all the stories it tells. But I still think it's important as a methodology that it continues. And we still have these considerations, and that means that when we do field recording now, we think about why we're doing what we're doing it, and we do it in a kinder, perhaps, way. But I think as a method, it's a method that needs to be promoted. And again, I'm biased. But, we need to listen more. I think we just need to listen more anyway, as a race.
That's a perfect note to end. So we can listen to these sounds on the screen here. So do engage with the website if you've not done so yet. But let's